Hey guys, welcome back to another tutorial. For those of you who have seen this video on my Instagram, I'm going to go ahead and play it for you now. We're going to be recreating this effect right here where we have a bullet traveling through a sphere. It's actually simpler than you might think, and there's a few little tricks that we're going to use to sell this effect. So this is going to look really, really cool. We're going to go ahead and hop into it. Again, just so you guys know, it's not going to look exactly like it does right here, just because we're probably going to use a different HDRI, a few different materials, but I am going to show you how I created this so that you guys can go ahead and try it on your own. It's a really cool effect, and there's going to be a few different things that we're going to be teaching along the way to achieve this. So I'm going to go ahead and X out of this and open up a new Blender document. So we're in our new file here. So the very first thing we're going to want to do is kind of set up our scene. So I deleted the cube already. I'm going to go ahead and just click on the camera. I'm just going to go ahead and completely center our camera just to set up our scene here. I'm going to rotate it on the X-axis, and I'm going to bring it back on the Y. I'm going to add in a plane and scale that up by 10. And then I'm going to bring my camera up above the scene like this. I'm going to go ahead and click on my plane, tab into edit mode, select a face or an edge over here, E, Z, to bring that up on the Z axis. And then I'm going to select this edge here, and I'm just going to bevel it out like so. And then I'm going to add a bunch of segments to that. And this is just going to be our stage. And I'm going to shade that auto smooth. And this way we just have a nice stage under our scene here. Let's go ahead and add in a round cube. So instead of using the sphere, we're going to be using the round cube. Okay, and then for our radius, we're going to choose 1. And then for the arcs, we're going to choose 20 for now. Let's go ahead and take a look. Actually, I'm going to choose 30 for that. All right, that looks good. And then right-click, shade auto smooth. Bring that up above our canvas here, our surface. Now, if you guys don't have access to this, you can go to Preferences, Add-ons, and then type in type in Extra Objects, and then this is the add-on right here, Extra Mesh Objects. So it's going to be the round cube. We're not using a sphere because it's not perfect. Now let's go ahead and create a bullet. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a cylinder here, and I'm going to roughly outline this bullet. Let's just bring this into edit mode here. I'm going to start by taking the top face and kind of scaling it in like that. I'm going to go to my side view here. I'm going to add in a loop cut. Kind of put it right about there, scale it up just a little bit, and then we're just going to kind of round out this shape as much as we can. Why is this not scaling? Sorry guys. There we go. Scale. S to scale, and then we're going to take the top face here, and we're going to use our inset tool right here, inset faces. And we're just going to inset this just a little bit like that. And we're going to do the same to the bottom side as well. Again, you guys can go crazy with this if you want to. I'm going to be adding a few modifiers to this. So I'm out of edit mode now. I'm going to go ahead and add a bevel modifier, an edge split modifier, and then a subdivision surface modifier. Now, this is where you can kind of decide how many or how thick you want your bevel to be. You can also decide how many segments. I'm just going to right click, shade auto smooth. And then when you go back into edit mode, if you guys want, you can further take these things and scale them. I'm going to use vertices, there we go. And if you want to turn on that X-ray mode, that's probably the best to do for this. That looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that for the bullet. I'm really not going to go crazy with modeling it, but that would be how you would go about that. If you guys want a more rounded edge, you can inset that face more, you can scale the vertices and things like that, but I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate that on the Y-axis, 90 degrees. I'm going to go to my side view and scale it down to the point where it's a little bit smaller than our sphere. Something like that should be pretty much perfect. That should work there. And then I'm going to move it over GX on our X-axis to kind of start it over here. Now this is where we want to start setting up the scene before we get into the dynamic paint part of this. So I'm just going to snap to my camera using numpad 0. I'm going to go over to my environment tab, and I'm going to choose this little dot here, environment texture. And then I'm going to open up my HDRI folder, and I'm going to find something that I think looks good. I believe this is the exact one I used here from Polyhaven. I'm going to open that up, go to my rendered view, and then I'm going to hop over to cycles, select my GPU, and we should be running a lot smoother here now. This is looking good. For our stage, I'm going to come back to that. Now for our sphere, I'm going to add a new material. I'm going to give this a glass BSDF with 0 roughness and 1.33 IOR so that it looks like water. The actual shader that I used on my original video was a glass dispersion shader. I can link that in the description below. For now, we're going to be using this. Now for our stage here, we can do multiple things. We can either just give this a really simple dark shader, or we can do that grid shader. So I can come back to that later, but for now I'm going to go ahead and take my bullet. I'm just going to give this a metallic shader, just to make it look like some kind of orange, yellow, copper material. High rough or low roughness, high metallic. That looks pretty good. That might be a little bit too saturated. Something like that might be nice. Again, you guys can use whatever you want. This is just what I'm using for the tutorial. Now let's go ahead and animate this thing, and we'll come back to the materials in a little bit. So I'm going to go back to solid view. On frame 1, I'm just going to bring up my timeline here. Go ahead and insert a keyframe. I, shortcut for inserting the keyframe. Insert your location and your rotation on frame 1. Now this is where we get to decide how far and how long we want the bullet to travel. So I think I'm just going to go over to frame 90, and then I'm just going to go to my side view and then GX to move this along the x-axis, and I'll just stop it like right here. Insert another keyframe. Now if we play this back from frame 1 to 90, you can see the bullet is now traveling across our scene as such. So now that we have all of that set up, let's go ahead to our output properties and just make that final end frame 90, just like that. That looks perfect. So now how can we get this bullet to interact with our sphere? It's actually quite simple. Go ahead and click on our sphere, go over to the physics settings here, click on dynamic paint, type, you want to choose canvas, and then go ahead and click on add canvas. Now we have our canvas set up, but instead of the surface type for paint, we want to actually choose waves. Now that we have that set up, we should be good to go there. The one other thing I want to go ahead and do is add a subdivision surface modifier. Go ahead and make sure you're saving it as you do this, because this could slow your computer down. And then for the levels, we'll choose 2 on both ends for the viewport and the render. Now go ahead and click on our bullet. Our bullet is the thing that is going to interact with our sphere. So with the bullet selected, you want to go ahead and add a dynamic paint brush. Go ahead and click on add brush. And now this should be good to interact with our sphere. Let's go ahead and play this back and just see what we get. Very cool. So just like that, we have some interaction. Now, you guys can completely customize this. Right now, I would probably try to make this either faster or possibly make the bullet bigger. But do you see how cool that is? If we go to our side view, you'll be able to really see it here. Look at that. Just like that, we have an interaction with our sphere. Very simple, right? You have a brush acting as the thing that interacts with the canvas, and then the canvas is our sphere, which is our like liquid drop. Now this looks really, really cool. And there's a few more things we're going to do to really step this up. But first of all, I'm going to click on my bullet, go back to frame 1, and then I'm going to highlight, choosing A. I'm going to highlight all keyframes, and I'm going to scale them back to frame 60 so that this is just going just a little bit faster. But I'm going to show you guys how to bake this real quick. Go ahead and click on your sphere, scroll down to the right hand side where it says cache, and then up here for the end frame, I'm just going to choose 60. And then you just want to click on bake there. And what that's going to do is it's going to bake our dynamic paint so that now we have, and as you can see, it's a little faster now. Now we have everything baked in. You shouldn't have any issues rendering or anything like that. Snapping back to our camera, I'm going to go to render view and just check out what this looks like right now. Very cool. So already we have such a cool effect. And I'll head into the materials for the last part of this, but right now that's pretty much the tutorial. But I'm going to show you guys a way to sell this effect even more. As you can see, when the bullet travels through, nothing's really happening on the inside. We're going to go ahead and change that. I am going to show you guys a little trick that I came up with for how to create an air bubble inside of this object. So you just want to go ahead and click on our bullet, go back to frame 1, and I'm just going to go ahead and Shift D to duplicate that. Okay, so now we have our bullet duplicated right here. I'm going to highlight all the keyframes and delete them from the timeline. So now we have our bullet just standing by itself, not animated. I'm going to go back to my side view. I'm going to move this bullet to about there, and I'm going to scale it on the x-axis. Now, you're probably thinking, what are we doing here? We're actually going to cut with a Boolean modifier into our sphere to create this air bubble. Now, this part is very intricate, so I'm going to skip a little bit of it, but I'm going to explain what I'm doing. So go ahead and click on your sphere. Go to your modifiers and then add a modifier. The type is going to be Boolean. Go ahead and click on that. And there's going to be this little eyedropper tool so we can select the object that's going to cut into the sphere. And then just select that cylinder. Now, if you go ahead and hide that cylinder, you'll notice how now it's cutting into our object, right? So this is great. So if we go to our side view, or sorry, our camera view, go to the rendered mode, you'll see that we're actually cutting into this object right here, right? Now, another thing I'm going to do to keep this a little simpler is with this object right here, our actual bullet that we've duplicated, I'm going to take off the subdivisions for now just to make this run a little bit smoother. And then you can also disable the dynamic paint as well, so get rid of that. And if you guys want to, you can get rid of the bevel and the edge split, but you don't have to. Just make sure that's shaded smooth. So again, when we hide this, right, you can see that there's a little air bubble. Now, the goal here is to see when our bullet starts to hit the side of the sphere, which is about frame, let's see, let's go back. Pretty much the exact moment is about frame 21. It's going to depend on your speed of your animation, but the goal is to take that other cylinder, right, which I'm also going to shade just a different color. I'll just put it back to the default. If you scale this up, right, just enough where it covers the bullet, we can actually animate this to track our bullet. So I'm going to go ahead and move this back on the x-axis. Cool. It's running very slow because there's a lot of subdivisions. So in order to make that run smoother, I'm going to click on my round cube, our round cube right here, and I'm just going to disable the subdivision for the viewport so it goes a little bit quicker. Head back over to solid mode. As you guys can see, if we scale this up just to beyond that point and move it back, and then we hide it, you'll see that we have just the slightest air bubble. Now this is where you guys are going to have to get really creative with how big your air bubble is and where it starts and where it ends. So in this case right here, if I were to insert a keyframe on our air bubble object for the location and rotation, and then figure out when the bullet exits, which is about there, I could then move this along the x-axis like that, insert another keyframe, and then if we go ahead and hide this from the viewport, this is what it's going to look like. Now it's a little bit off, but if you go frame by frame, you can see that we can actually cut out the part of the sphere that we want the air bubble to be in, and then once our bullet exits, if we click back on that original object and unhide it, now we can start scaling this down so that the air bubble actually dissipates in a way. So there's going to be many ways you probably go about doing this. I just thought this was a cool way to do it. So from frame 32, I'm going to head over to frame 50 or maybe 60. And then I'm going to scale this down like crazy, right? I'm sorry, on frame 32, I'm going to insert the location, rotation, and scale. Then I'm going to head over to frame 60, scale it down a bunch, stretch it on the x-axis, scale it down just a little bit more, insert location, rotation, and scale, and then I'm going to move forward to frame 70, and I'm going to make it so small that you can barely see it, and I'm just going to move it completely out of the scene like that. So now if we watch this, it's going to look a little strange, right? So you have the bullet traveling through, our air pocket, and then our air pocket's going to start to shrink down, and then eventually it's just going to kind of disappear. Now there's many ways that you can go about animating this. I just thought this was the easiest way. I'm not going to go frame by frame for this tutorial because it's going to take way too long. Now if you're seeing these jagged edges, just remember we have our subdivision disabled, so I'm going to go ahead and re-enable that and save. As you can see, those edges get cleaned up really nicely. Now if we play this back, right, you can see we have our air bubble right here. Again, this is up to you guys to fine tune this frame by frame. I'm not going to go through frame by frame because I do not have time to do that for this tutorial. But as you can see, the bullet is traveling through our object and it looks really, really good. Now the only final thing that I'm going to do is go ahead and set up some camera settings and mess around with the materials just a little bit more to get the desired effect. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm actually going to hide this plane for a second. I'm going to add in a new floor plane, scale it up 10, and I'm just going to show you guys how to add a quick grid shader, and then we're going to add some depth of field to our scene as well. So let me go ahead and go over to the shading tab. I'm just going to go to my rendered view, save that. With our plane selected, I'm going to create a completely new material. I'm going to add in a brick texture, and I'm just going to plug this in as follows. Now like you see right here, we already have our brick texture. Now we just need to change some settings here. Our offset, you're going to set that to 0. And then for the brick width and the height, we just want those to be the same, so I'm going to make those both 0.25. And as you can see, we already have a little bit of a grid here. For the mortar, I'm going to change that to white, and then for the first color, I'm just going to kind of select a darker green, and then hovering over that color, copy that, and paste it to the other color there. For the mortar size, I'm going to just make that a little bit smaller. That looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and snap to our camera real quick and see what we have. Now this is where you can adjust your scale as needed. I think that looks pretty good. I'll lower the roughness a little bit to give it somewhat of a metallic look as well. Now that's pretty much your grid floor shader there. Again, you guys can hold shift and you can edit the thickness of everything. I think this looks pretty good. I don't really remember what I used for the exact reel. Go ahead and click on our camera. Check depth of field and then go to your eyedropper tool and select your round cube and then set your f-stop to something like really low, like maybe 0.1 or 0.2. And as you can see, we have that nice blurred background effect that just looks so good. Now there's only really a couple last minute things that we want to do. We want to go to the shading tab. I'm going to go ahead and click on world right here instead of object. I'm going to zoom out and I'm just going to add in a couple of nodes so that we can define our background. Texture coordinate is going to be that first node, and then mapping is going to be the second. Now you guys have probably seen this in past tutorials, but if you plug everything up like this, we can now take our Z rotation and we can completely move the background however we want for our scene. So just find something you really like, and then when you think you found something you really like for the actual scene, you can kind of lock it in by just stopping that rotation. That looks pretty good, and you guys can even animate that if you want to. But this is pretty much the final result. I might go for something more along this angle right here. I think that's what I did for the actual video. But guys, this looks really cool. So if we go ahead and play this back, it's going to go a little bit slow. I'm just going to go frame by frame. Now again, remember, for our Boolean object, we actually want to make sure that that's not even there until the bullet's there. So I'm going to go back to frame 19, move this along the x-axis. And I'm going to insert a keyframe. So yeah, this shouldn't start until our bullet is right there. So if we go frame by frame, it's just a little bit off. Again, this took me a very long time to actually animate frame by frame. But that air bubble, you can align it perfectly with the bullet. Again, I'm not going to be doing that for this tutorial because it's going to take literally an hour. So that's how long it took me last time. But then you see the bullet exit, right? And then as you can see, everything scales back down like that. And it just dissipates. So that bubble is going to dissipate, and then it's going to pretty much disappear out of the scene, and our sphere is going to still be warped by that dynamic paint. So this is going to be a really cool effect, guys. I do hope you enjoyed it. That's pretty much exactly what I did for my Instagram reel. The only difference is that I animated our air bubble frame by frame, which took me a very long time, so I'm not going to be showing you that now. We'll just go ahead and hop into some render settings real quick, and I'll show you guys how you would render this. So as you guys can see, if you're like kind of sitting right here, it's a little bit strange with the glass. What I'm going to do for our light path settings is I'm just going to set everything to like 3 for now. 3. We'll go to 15. We don't have any volume, so I'm going to set that to 0. And then I'm going to bump up transmission to 5 and transparent to 5. That looks pretty good. Overall, like the scene looks great. You guys can turn on denoising. I'm going to go with 150 samples. Optics denoising, GPU, yep, everything's good. Everything's pretty much set up. You can turn on motion blur if you would like. And then there's one more thing we can do to kind of help sell this just a little bit more. I'm going to head over to the compositing tab, click on use nodes, and then we're just going to add in a little lens distortion. So I'm going to go ahead and type in lens distortion, plug that in right there, and then I'm going to add in a viewer node so we can see what this is going to look like. Plug everything in as follows. And then for our dispersion, our dispersion, try 0.01 for now. Let's go ahead and render this and see what it looks like. Go ahead and give this a moment to render. And after it's done rendering, okay, so actually this is great. This is why I wanted to show you guys this. You guys can see our air bubble material right here should not be showing for the render. So make sure in your hierarchy, you click that little camera button so that it is not actually rendered. Let's go ahead and render this again, see what this looks like. So far, so good. It's a very quick render as well. There's not a lot to it. And let's go ahead and see if that dispersion was made there. It does not look like it was. All right, so as you guys can see, when you bump up that value to 0.1, you can really see, hold on, let me zoom in. You can really see the edges there are getting quite distorted. And it looks pretty cool, but if you guys aren't going for that very intense effect, you can just turn this down to 0.05 and it won't be as bad. And at this point, you guys are pretty much good to get on with your rendering. You can render all the frames together in a PNG sequence, and then you can import them back into Blender's video compositor and video sequencer, and you can actually put them back to back to create your animation. If you guys don't know how to do that, I do have a tutorial on that as well on my channel. And if you're looking for more ways to explore your creativity with dynamic paint, there is like literally 10 more ways you can do, you can create things with dynamic paint. I actually have a video, my last video before this one is going to show you like 5 or 6 ways to actually use dynamic paint in realistic projects. So things you would actually use it for on a real life basis. Now, again, guys, you're going to want to probably rebake this. I just realized I think I lost the old bake somehow. So you can always click on delete bake and then bake that again. Give that a moment. And just make sure you don't have any other dynamic paint brushes. You just want to make sure that bullet is the only brush interacting with the sphere. And that is pretty much it for this tutorial, guys. I do hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. We covered a lot of different things in this tutorial. We covered shading, we covered modeling, and this effect is just so cool. I'll play it for you one more time. This is the final effect here that I was able to achieve. Again, you're probably noticing the glass looks a little bit different. I will include the shader link, but if you guys look frame by frame, you'll notice, I don't know if it's going to let me go frame by frame, you'll notice how close that air bubble is to the bullet. That took me hours to animate, so if you guys are looking for that exact clean result, you're just going to have to spend time on those keyframes, going frame by frame, making sure that that bullet is very close to the edge of the air bubble. So guys, but that air bubble technique, I've never seen anybody else use that before, so I do hope that you guys liked that little trick. That's pretty much it for the tutorial, so I don't want to make it go on any longer. If you guys enjoyed this, please subscribe. There will be more content soon. I'm glad I was able to pump out this tutorial real quick for you guys. And again, if you guys do support me on Patreon, this exact file that I used for my Instagram reel will be available to download on that second tier on Patreon, and you get access to all of my tutorial files. So any of the tutorials that you see on YouTube, if I have the Blender file for it, I put it on Google Drive for you guys so you guys can actually access that. So that is a lot of free content, or sorry, a lot of paid content, and for only 25 bucks a month, I think it's an absolute steal, because a lot of people ask me for my source files all the time. Now you can actually get them. I do also have assets available on Gumroad if you guys are interested in checking those out as well. And I do have a Discord and an Instagram. Everything will be linked down below. I hope you guys have a great day. Take care, and let me know if you decide to go ahead and recreate this yourself. DM me on Instagram. I would love to see the result. All right, guys, take it easy and have a great day.